Hey, you're probably not going to believe this, but I think I want to toot my own horn for just a minute. Some of you are like, oh God, isn't that all you ever do? Look, I think I was involved in one of the most iconic moments in Survivor history, bar none. And I think it exposes and overcomes the silliness of people who comment on my YouTube and Instagram and challenge me about the idea that I might not be able to play now in recent years. I think they missed the point. I think they don't understand the level of play in which I engaged from the outset. And I want to try to toot my own horn and prove to you who are listening now a little bit about what was going on way, way, way ahead of its time. Yeah, some of you will call this arrogance, but indulge me. If you want to listen, do so. If not, see you on the flip side. So, in the first season, the original season of Survivor, everything was new, obviously. We had to figure out how to play this game with limited, if any, guidance. The rules, we were told, were outwit, outlast, outplay. So I knew from the outset this was going to be challenging. This was going to be different from what viewers were comfortable seeing in the past, were used to seeing, and might have some real difficulty seeing others choosing to do it. But regardless, I figured by the time the show played out, most viewers would understand the game and appreciate the good gameplay. Boy, was I wrong! Oh, but I think more and more viewers are catching up now and understand how the game was designed to be played, and that how one plays the game is not necessarily the way they engage people in real life. And in fact, having the self-awareness and confidence to play it well from the outset without having seen anyone play it before might be an indication to just how someone like me might live life differently and not use some of the manipulative tools, etc., that I use in the game and I'm clearly capable of using. I think in real life it really bit me in the ass because corrupt prosecutors and others used the public's misunderstanding of how I interacted within the context of a game and its rules to take advantage of an innocent man who's actually a really good human being contributing to society in positive ways. Yeah, I told you I was going to toot my own horn. Who else is going to do it? So that's my perspective there. But as the game played, one of the most iconic happenings, occurrences, one of the most interesting choices I had to make, and one of the most long-lasting examples, still to this day in all the experiences that have unfolded on Survivor, I think has to do with the final challenge in which Kelly, Rudy, and I had our hands attached to a pole. And when our hands were removed from that pole, we were out of the game. The last person to have their hand on the pole got to choose which of those other two people who'd removed their hands from the pole, intentionally or otherwise, would go to the final vote with them, would be subjected to what the jurors would decide about who gets the $1 million. When we began the challenge, my head was spinning. It was early in the morning. The sun was up and it was hot. And I was thinking about how long this challenge might go on. We were standing on logs, on sand that wiggled a little bit, and we had one hand on this totem pole type instrument. And if we removed our hands from it, we were out of the game. And as time passed and the sun rose, I was thinking about the game, and I was thinking about how depleted I was and how exhausted I was, and whether or not my mind was playing tricks on me as I started to formulate a decision about how I was going to handle this challenge. But I kept returning to what seemed the most appropriate course of action. I kept thinking that I needed to take my hand off the challenge and that I needed to do it immediately. Take my hand off the pole. I said challenge. Here's what happened. Rudy and I had made an alliance to the end. Rudy, being a Navy SEAL, I really knew that I could trust him. There were many things he said within the game that showed me how his ethics and his sincerity were much, much greater than the game itself. I knew from having played the game with Rudy that Rudy wasn't able to separate gameplay from real life. And so that's something I had respect for, but at the same time I had to understand in order to fulfill my obligation to him and to make choices that made sense within the game. Wow, really complicated and really challenging in my mind. So I had to think that through a lot. On the flip side was Kelly, a 22-year-old river rafting guide who at that time I hadn't understood had compromised ethics. It was only later when I learned what she did to me outside the game that helped me understand some real problems that were there. But during the game and at that point, I realized that Kelly couldn't take Rudy, if she won, to the final episode with any chance whatsoever of winning. I knew that the other participants would have voted Rudy the winner. Crotchety Rudy, Rowdy Rudy's Kitchen. Everybody thought of him as an iconic guy, just this really powerfully interesting, funny old man, 72 years old at the time. And though there wasn't a chance that Rudy could have ever been that long in the game without my having protected him and kept him there, because he was the strongest member of my alliance, I also knew that he would be awarded the win hands down over Kelly. Reverse, I knew I could talk to Rudy that he had to take me to the end if I'd stepped out of the challenge because we had the alliance. I really almost didn't even have to say it. I knew that Rudy would take me to the end. That's just who he is. And so when I finished the long processing of those complicated ideas and connections and wrestled with whether or not I was losing my mind or undermining my chances at $1 million. Was I so depleted that I was giving up? Oh, it was an awfully stressful time for me. But I finally understood it clearly enough, and I took my hand off the pole. Rudy and Kelly didn't know what to do with that. Kelly actually looked at me and said, "Rich, what are you doing?" Their reactions were priceless. Unfortunately, some outside the game stuff wasn't so pleasurable. Jeff, again, wonderful host, but a man you don't know well and not a good human being, was furious, stomping around, almost calling me names, suggesting, "How dare I do it? What do you think you're doing? What's going," he was furious in a way that was not just inappropriate, it was outside the game, and it was It was silly. And of course, you'll never see any of that footage. But he really just didn't get it. He didn't get it then, and I still wonder to this day whether Jeff is capable of understanding some of the subtleties and stresses of the game because he's been so outside it, albeit close to it, observing it, but outside it always. Anyway, his feelings weren't something with which I was most concerned. The truth is, I'd gotten to know him a little bit up until that point, so I did have to contemplate what was happening with producers at the time too. And I knew, in having removed my hand, that they would be shocked. I knew they weren't prepared for that kind of gameplay, that a few steps ahead kind of thinking for which I became known. So I did it, and I removed my hand, and I reacted to Rudy's and Kelly's reactions by sharing with them the only choice either of them had was to bring me to the end. And so I let them know that I did this for all of us. Why should I continue to leave my hand on the pole when I know that no matter which of you stays the longest, you have to take me to the end? And I explained to Kelly that she couldn't take Rudy because she couldn't win against him. And I explained to Rudy that we had an alliance to the end and that that's where we would go. So I was helping them suffer less by removing my hand and allowing them to play it out until they decided the challenge was over and we were to move on to the next phase, which was the final tribal council, in which one of us would be voted the winner. It was a powerfully complicated thought process where I had to take so many things into account under conditions that are hard to describe, being that far, 38 days into the game. But I'm so proud of my choice and my decision. And it's reflective of gameplay that wasn't used for many seasons, maybe even more than a decade later. And in fact, many players still aren't capable of thinking through the kind of choices they need to make in ways that had to happen in that moment. Is that enough tooting of my own horn for you? I'm really proud of that moment. Thanks for indulging me. 80% of you who are listening to these videos have not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. Just hit the subscription button and hit the notification button and you'll be informed when I have another video up for you to listen to. After you've subscribed, comment. Comment positively, comment negatively. No holds barred. Just say what you're thinking. That's what will make our exchange even more valuable. As I'm able, I'll create new videos responsive to that commentary. So like away, or dislike, on that rare occasion you may feel the need to do so. But either way, thank you.